Everybody, it's your boy Manny here once again. Welcome back to DFS Zone, and I have a brand new video for you guys. We're going to discuss today what are the best possible plays for us in the tight end position this week in the NFL week number 2. And before I get started, drop a like on the video. Let's try to get 50 likes or better on this video. Really greatly will appreciate it. And if you have not subscribed, it's your first time here, you have not subscribed to the channel, please do so down below, and do not forget to put on those post notifications. This way you do not miss out on any of these videos during the course of the season, as well as the live shows. I do have a live show every Saturday, 7 p.m. I go live. We discuss the slate, look over the game stacks, team stacks, any other possible value plays that I've discovered or I feel are good possible plays for us here as a DFS community. I will discuss tomorrow, and that's actually tomorrow night at 7 p.m. So again, subscribe down below, put on those post notifications. This way you will not miss out on that. And I also will be carrying it on into NBA season. I just finished doing WNBA, the entire WNBA season I covered, and I will be covering the entire NBA season, which I look so much forward to, as well as right now going into week 2 of the NFL. All right, tight ends. When it comes to tight ends, to be honest with you guys, I normally don't pay up for tight ends, at least even on GPPs, maybe on some cash games, only in small slates. Like I mentioned last week, if you did not watch my videos from last week, when it comes to quarterbacks and tight ends, usually at least mostly on both sides, DK as well as FanDuel, I normally pay down a little bit. Quarterback maybe mid-tier, maybe once in a while I take a stab at someone really cheap, but usually it's in the mid-tier. But I still will give you what I think are the best possible plays. You're going to always get that here. It'll be more than likely 2 plays or better per position, so you're never going to be definitely going to get a number of different options. But at tight end, we definitely will love to pay down. I normally like to pay down. I'm not recommending you guys to do what I do, but I'm letting you know that that is definitely a very safe, good tip that I can give individuals, especially new DFS NFL players. Definitely should pay down a little bit at tight end. Sometimes the tight ends are a little expensive. And as we look here at FanDuel, Gronkowski, great play. We know Gronkowski is probably the best tight end in the league. Just 8,100 is just too much money for me. I am not willing to pay up for Gronkowski in a matchup against Jacksonville. So definitely, sorry about that. Definitely, this is one area where I would definitely skip. Kelsey is definitely a fine play. Should bounce back this week. I expect Kansas City, with all the offensive weapons they have, including Kelsey. He had 6 targets last week, only caught 1 pass, but that's going to change. This guy is such an integral part of this offense. I can't see him being shut down for too long. I expect this high-scoring game. This game could be in the 30s. I really think it could be possibly in the 30s. Both teams definitely, I suspect, are going to have issues with each other's offenses. And I think when they all get said and done, I think Kansas City has a possibility of shocking Pittsburgh here in Pittsburgh, just due to the fact that if they can get Kelsey, Mahomes, Hunt, and Hill all working with one another, everybody getting some touches, it could be a very scary thing with Kansas City. They have a lot of offensive weapons, and this man here needs to get involved in that this coming week. So expect Kelsey. I think he's a fine player, 6,800. I'm just not willing to pay for him. Jordan Reed and Jimmy Graham are both in good spots as well. Jimmy Graham, especially Minnesota last week, had their problems with George Kittle, and I could see them possibly having some issues here as well. Jimmy Graham has had an excellent career as far as receiving the ball as a tight end. Jordan Reed, same thing here against Indianapolis, definitely in a good spot as well. I just don't want to pay 6,206, but both of these guys are pretty reasonable if you wanted to play them on DK. Reed is 5K and Jimmy Graham is 4,800, so I'm okay with that there. DK is definitely priced better the tight ends this week. I really love some of the prices there. But my first guy I really want to discuss that I really love this week is George Kittle. 5,600 here. George Kittle, he is a bargain over here on DK. DK here, he is 3,800, folks. I mean, that is a great possible play here. He's going up against Detroit, who had their issues last week with the Jets. Not so much with the tight end, but with Quincy Enunwa, who kind of is like a tight end, plays a lot of slot position. I could see George Kittle having a very good time here. Not only that, Kittle is also, since pairing up with Jimmy Garoppolo, with Jimmy G, he's been doing very well. His connections, his rapport so far, and the way they've been getting their timing down, I think he's in a very good spot with Jimmy G. I mean, last week versus Minnesota, he had 9 targets. He had 5 receptions for 90 yards, 11.5 fantasy points, okay, on FanDuel, and 14 in DK. So not bad at all, man. That is actually above league average from last year at about 8.5 was, I think, was the minimum last year in league average as far as fantasy points for a tight end. In 2017, his statistics were pretty good. He had 63 targets last year, 43 receptions, 515 yards, and 2 TDs. Inside the 20 in the red zone, he was pretty good as well. He was definitely targeted. 16 targets in the red zone. Inside the 20, had 9 receptions, 41 yards, and 2 touchdowns. While when he was inside the 10, he actually, those 2 touchdowns he had within the 20 were inside the 10, as he had 2 TDs inside the 10, 22 yards, 7 targets, and 4 receptions. Since Jimmy G and him have paired up, especially late last year, as Garoppolo came in with about 5 games left in the season, 6. He put up 16 receptions with this gentleman. So George Kittle definitely has done well with Jimmy G as the quarterback. 16 receptions with Jimmy G, and that's pretty much about, what, 3 receptions a game? So not too bad. This season, inside the 20, he only had that 1 game last week. He had 2 targets, had 1 reception for 9 yards. He's going up against Detroit. Detroit last year versus tight ends, they were right there in top 10 as one of the worst defenses against tight end. 836 yards given up last year, 8 TDs, nearly 12 DK points per game. Of course, again, like I mentioned before, a little bit above average for the year as far as league-wide. FanDuel points, 9.8. Now, granted, out of the guys that I'm going to speak to you about today, the 3 or 4 plays I have, these gentlemen, this defense here actually is at least the better one out of all the other 3 that I'm going to mention. Detroit in the red zone in 2017 gave up 62% touchdowns to their opponents in the red zone, so 62% of the time they scored at least a touchdown. They did a little bit better last week for the first game against the New York Jets. I think the Jets had 3 or 4 opportunities, only scored once. So again, George Kittle here, excellent play for us, man. He's definitely an excellent play. I think he can be really explosive tomorrow on Sunday. Excuse me. The next guy I'm going to discuss is right below him, Jack Doyle. I love Jack Doyle here. He's 5,600 on FanDuel. He's 4,000 on DK. I think that's an excellent price for Jack Doyle. He gets a lot of targets, man. So he's going up against Washington this week. And Washington last year had their issues too. Last week, he had 10 targets, 7 receptions, 60 yards. All right, he put up 7.5 FanDuel points and 12 DK points. In 2017, his stat lines were like this: 108 targets, 80 receptions. He had a 74% catch percentage, 690 yards, 4 touchdowns, 46 yards per game. Now, granted, he had 108 targets last year, and this is without Andrew Luck. Him and Andrew Luck are like, this is Andrew Luck's guy. And now Andrew Luck is back. You can imagine how many targets this guy's going to get. He is a target machine. He is perfect for DK with that PPR. You can't go wrong with Jack Doyle, especially in a matchup like this. All right? Him, and then again, we got to remember, Indianapolis, their offense is based off Jack Doyle. They are a tight end oriented offense. They used Jack Doyle. They used also Eric Ebron last week. Now, granted, Ebron did have more FanDuel fantasy points last week, 13. But Jack Doyle gets more of the targets. He starts. He's going to get a lot more of the targets than Eric Ebron. I think either one of them are good plays, but I definitely got to go with Jack Doyle, especially at DK for 4K and knowing the PPR with him. He's a targeted tight end. He's going to get his targets, okay? And he's back with his regular quarterback as well. In the red zone, 10 targets, 6 receptions, 4 TDs last year. This year, he had 2 targets last week in the first game, 1 reception for 9 yards. They're going up against Washington. Washington last year gave up 79 receptions to tight ends, 970 yards, and 8 touchdowns. The tight ends were averaging 14.2 DK fantasy points last year and 11.5 FanDuel points. In the red zone, Washington gave up 51% of the time opponents got in the red zone. They gave up a touchdown, and so far this year, after game 1, they gave up 50%, 2 opportunities, 1 score, 50% last week. And last week they played against Arizona, and granted, Arizona, Seals Jones only had about 6 targets and 3 receptions, but it's a totally different animal here, man. you know, going up against a team that's really tight end oriented as far as the tight end being involved in the games and offensively. And then it's just the tandem of knowing that Andrew Luck loves to go to Jack Doyle. They have a great connection. I see him having an awesome game tomorrow. Definitely like Jack Doyle here. I think it's someone that we all should be considering. My next guy that I want to talk about that I think is a fine play tomorrow is Mr. Ben Watson. Ben Watson is now with New Orleans. Remember, he spent the last several years with the Baltimore Ravens. He's 5,100 here on FanDuel. He's only 3,400. 3,400. Where is it? 3,400 on DK, man. Now, granted, he didn't get a whole lot of targets last week. Last week, he had 4 targets. Got all 4 of them. 4 receptions, 44 yards. Pretty much average 11 yards per catch. That is pretty awesome right there. 6.4 FanDuel points and 8.4 DK points. Now, I expect those totals to go up a little bit higher this week. Last year, as a Baltimore Raven, 79 targets, 61 receptions, 522 yards, 4 touchdowns, 32.6 yards per game. In the red zone, he was marvelous. 13 targets, 8 receptions, 20 yards, 3 TDs. Inside the 10, he was even better. 7 targets last year, 5 receptions, 6 yards, 3 TDs. So inside the red zone, he was targeted, and he got 3 touchdowns within the 10-yard line. He actually also, as a Baltimore Raven, played against Cleveland and lit them up last year. Very important stat that I really love here. 2 games last year against Cleveland as a Baltimore Raven. He had 8 receptions in one game and 4 receptions in the other. A total of 12 receptions, a total of 165 yards and 1 touchdown. He had 17.1 and 17.4 DK points. Pretty much averaged 17 DK points against Cleveland last year. And I'm sure New Orleans knows all about this. And they're looking at the statistics. They are definitely looking for ways to Ben Watson to have a successful outing again this Sunday. So Ben Watson is definitely in a very good position, being very tough and being able to have a lot of success already with Cleveland. And Cleveland really hasn't made a whole lot of changes on defense to change those results from last year. So we'll see. I definitely love Ben Watson here, and he's definitely an awesome play on DK for 3,400. Cleveland's coming in here 868 yards to tight ends last year. That was within the top 10 worst in the league. They gave up 10 TDs, which was top 4 as far as defenses against tight ends. 14.8 DK points to tight ends, again above the league average of at least minimum 8 or 9 fantasy points, and 11.9 FanDuel points. In the red zone, 67% of the time the opponents got in the red zone, they scored a touchdown. And so far this year in 2018, they are giving up 66.6% in the red zone as well. So love Mr. Ben Watson here, man. I think he is an excellent play, someone everyone should consider. My last guy that I'm going to go to is probably somebody maybe that people are not going to speak about too much. Last week, my low value play was Jesse James, and he did okay with 7,500. He could be a sneaky play again this week. The guy I want to talk about is, if I can find him, it's Mr. Jonnu Smith. Jonnu Smith is going to be replacing, at least in my opinion, he should be. He was a second-round pick last year. Obviously, they took him as a top pick because they were eventually going to have him take over for Walker at some point. And I think his opportunity is going to come here now with Delaney Walker fracturing his ankle and out for the season. Jonnu Smith is going to get some time here. And if he doesn't, I'll be very surprised. But I think at 4,200 here and only 3,100 on DK, I think he is a great possible play here. Granted, he only got 3 targets, last week, 1 reception for 12 yards. And he doesn't have a whole lot of stats, but last year he did get 30 targets, 18 receptions for 157 yards, and he had 2 touchdowns. So he had a decent little first year, getting a little bit of time on the field. And he already has been under 1 year under his belt with Marcus Mariota, his quarterback. Houston, on the other hand, defensively, last year, 922 yards given up to tight ends, 9 TDs, which was in the top 4 defenses last year. That's the most TDs. 14.2 FanDuel points, DraftKings points, and 11.7 FanDuel points versus tight ends. In the red zone in 2017, 61% of the opponents scored a TD in the red zone. And so far this year, 75%, because New England was their first opponent. They had 4 opportunities in the red zone and they scored 3 times. So 75%, that automatically just makes me feel like, hey, you know, if they can get down there, and that's the whole point. The whole idea here is if Tennessee can get down in scoring position inside the 20, will they be able to get those opportunities and give Mr. Jonnu Smith an opportunity to get a couple of TDs? So we'll wait and see, but I think he's a fine play at 3,100 on DraftKings. He's a steal, and at the same time, and especially if he's going to play, and he is very cheap here as I guess the best value play on FanDuel, especially a person like me that I like to pay down at tight end so that I can pay up on getting those dual threat running backs, and of course those very, very seasoned, highly targeted, good receivers in favorable matchups. That's going to be the key, and that's where I like to go. But that's pretty much where I'm at, man. I think these are the best 4 possible plays. I did mention, like I said before, there's a couple of guys here that are pretty expensive on FanDuel, but priced a little bit reasonable on DK, that are in pretty good matchups as well. Like I said, Jordan Reed and Jimmy Graham. But other than that, that's basically all I got for you guys. I think those are the best possible plays. We'll discuss it a little bit further. If I find that there's any other possible values for us at tight end, I will share that with you guys tomorrow on the live show. So make sure that you have subscribed down below. Make sure that you have clicked on that bell notification there. This way you will get that information right away to you, and you'll be able to join us for the live show tomorrow. So make sure you take care of that. Other than that, that's basically it. God bless everybody. Everybody have a great Friday, and I'll see you guys the next time.